Hi, welcome back to 5 is Prime. In today's lesson, we are going to learn how to add fractions with unlike denominators. We have 3 things that we're going to do today. The first thing is to define a denominator versus a numerator. The second thing is to talk about the rules when adding fractions. And the third thing is to go over the steps to solve a problem. So, vocab, there are 2 words that we need to know. The first one is numerator, and that is the top number of the fraction. The other word is denominator, which is the bottom number of the fraction. I like to tell my students that the D is on the bottom, it's down below, to help them remember numerator from denominator. So the one down below starts with D. Alright, so let's get into it. Some of the rules of adding fractions is that you can't add fractions if the denominators are not alike. If you were to just go ahead and add these together and get 2/7, unfortunately you would be breaking the rules of math and you would get the wrong answer. So before we can add, our denominators need to be the same. So one way to do this is to skip count our 3 and our 4 out to figure out where they match up. So I'm going to start skip counting my 3's. So I'm going to list all of the multiples of 3. I've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. Oh. And for 4, I've got 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. Now looking at these lists, I have 12 and 12. So 12 is going to be my denominator that I'm going to use. This is called the LCM or the LCD, the least common either multiple or least common denominator. You might see one or both of those when you're learning about fractions, but they mean the same thing. So once we've decided what we're going to use for our LCD, we're going to go ahead and we're going to find equivalent fractions of 1/4 and 1/3. Now what I've done here is I've just taken my denominator that I'm going to use and I've just put it above each of my fractions. I have my 5th graders do that so that they know what they're working towards and they don't forget what their least common denominator is going to be. So next step is actually multiplying. So to figure out what we need to multiply by, we're going to ask ourselves 4 times what number will give us 12? And if you do your math in your head, it's going to be 3. So 4 times 3. And then on the other side, we have to ask 3 times what equals 12? Well, if 4 times 3 equals 12, 3 times 4 must equal 12. So I've got my multipliers on each side. Now I'm going to multiply the entire fraction by whatever multiplier I have. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 4 times 3 is 12. For the other side, 1 times 4 is 4, and 3 times 4 is 12. All right, so now I can move on and I can actually add these together. So I have matching denominators, that means I'm good to add. So 3 plus 4 is 7, and whenever you're adding or subtracting fractions, you don't actually add your denominator, you just bring it down and record it. It's going to be the same. Alright, so then 7/12 would be my answer. Let's try another one. We've got 2/3 and 1/5. So for this one, my first step is figuring out my common denominator. I can't add until those denominators are the same. So I'm going to skip count out 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 5, 10, 15. We are looking for the first number that matches up, and in this case that's going to be 15. It's going to go in my bubble up there. And now I need to figure out what I need to multiply my 2/3 by and my 1/5 by. So 3 times what equals 15, And 5 times what equals 15? 3 times 5 equals 15. So I'm going to multiply that entire fraction by 5. 5 times 3 equals 15. So I'm going to multiply this entire fraction by 3. I always tell my students, whatever you do to the top number, the numerator, you need to make sure to do to the denominator. If you do not do that, you're going to make a new fraction, and we don't want that. We want the fraction to represent the same amount. So 2 times 5 is 10, and 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 3 is 3, and 5 times 3 is 15. All right, so I have common denominators, and I'm good to add. So 10 plus 3 is 13, and then my denominator stays the same. All right, so my answer would be 3/15. I have one more, and if you feel like you want to practice this on your own, you can. You can just pause here, do the work on a scratch piece of paper or a whiteboard, and then come back and compare your work with mine to see if your work matches mine. All right, so we've got 1/8 plus 3/5. I cannot add until those denominators are the same. So we're going to skip count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and we'll do 8, 16, 24, 32, and if I look, I don't have anything in common quite yet, so I'm going to keep going. 30, 35, 40, 45. And for my 8s, my multiple of 8s, I'm going to continue with 40 and 48. Now if we take a look, I see common denominators. Least common multiple of 5 and 8 is going to be 40, so that's going to be my least common denominator. All right, now I've got to ask myself those questions again. 8 times what equals 40? And if I know my multiples of 8, I know it's going to be 8 times 5. Another trick you can do if you're not sure, you're still learning your math facts, is if you have these already mapped out, all of your multiples, you can just count your multiples. So I have 8 times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5. That means 8 times 5 is going to give me 40. And if 8 times 5 is 40, 5 times 8 must equal 40. Now I can find my equivalent fractions. 1 times 5 is 5, 5 times 8 is 40, 3 times 8 is 24, and 5 times 8 is 40. My denominators match, so I'm good to add. 5 plus 24 is 29, and then I just copy that denominator down. So if you did this one on your own, you should have got 29/40. That's all for today's lesson. I hope that this makes a little bit more sense, and if you feel like you've mastered this, you can move on to the next video of subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. I'll see you in the next one.